Virtual reality has become very popular in the last few years. With options like the Meta Quest line, VR has become an everyday item for many, and it's never been cheaper to jump into fully immersive VR and to play your favorite games and social experiences with friends, right? Or was there a time when there was an even cheaper option that brought in a whole wave of people to experience VR for the first time? Back in the days when the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive were battling to be the best VR headset for room-scale games, a new alternative entered the market which really shook things up. The Windows mixed reality platform and line of headsets came into the market in October of 2017, and ended up sparking a whole new generation of users to a niche that seemed too expensive for many to enter. Hey there, I'm Jamie, and I've been a big fan of VR for most of my life, but it really seemed like reality when Oculus first started making waves with their Kickstarter. The original Oculus Dev Kit made its rounds on YouTube in 2013, and by the time the Dev Kit 2 came out, I was sold. I saved up, and with some help covering part of the cost, I bought the Oculus Dev Kit 2. Even with my cheap laptop at the time, I was just so excited to finally have some sort of VR to experience for myself. When the Oculus Rift consumer version came out in 2015, I wasn't able to afford it at the time, so I kept using my DK2 up through till 2017. Even when I discovered a little game called Vrchat in early 2017, I still used the DK2 in VRChat just with an Xbox controller. And that was that. While I was happy to just have some form of VR, most people by that time were using the Oculus Rift or HTC Vive and experiencing full room scale VR with motion controls. I wanted that so much, but it was just still out of my price range, and I also wasn't quite so sure if my computer would even be able to run those headsets. So while I was busy trying to save up to decide which type of headset I should get, a new line of headsets entered the market. And to be honest, they didn't really seem all that appealing. Windows had a deal with various manufacturers to build VR headsets to their specs, which would then run on Windows natively. These WMR headsets seemed like they were in an awkward spot. They had higher resolution than the Rift and Vive, but they used a single LCD panel instead of dual OLED panels, and their method of tracking was this new thing called inside-out tracking, where the controllers and headset position are tracked by cameras on the headset rather than external cameras or base stations like the Vive or Rift. VR enthusiasts at the time felt like this was a gimmick that would never catch on. These WMR headsets were built cheaply, very light, lacked features like IPD adjustment, and just overall didn't seem as impressive as the established brands. Not when at launch they cost the same or even more than a new Rift at the time, at around $500 or even more depending if you got models with controllers. It just didn't make any sense to buy one. That is, until two things happened in January of 2018. VRChat got extremely popular overnight.
You don't know the way. Do you know the way? You have to have Ebola to know the way.
And the prices of many WMR headsets got cut in half, and at times even going on sale beyond that, down to as low as $150. From that point, the cheap WMR headsets became very popular and introduced many to VR for the first time. The Lenovo Explorer at $200 became my first upgrade from the old DK2, and I loved it the whole time that I used it.
If you're watching this, you're probably in the same boat that I was. I couldn't decide between the Oculus or the Vive. It was just so many options. And then these Windows Mixed Reality headsets came in, and that just threw another bunch into the list of the options. After a lot of thought and weighing out the benefits of the different headsets, I decided on the Oculus. I was going to get the Oculus. I was probably about a week away from getting it, and then the Lenovo Explorer went and dropped their price to $200 US or $250 in Canada. And at that moment, I just went straight ahead and bought it. And to be honest, I'm actually really happy I did.
These early WMR headsets were bare bones, which fit with their new price. They used a single LCD panel rather than dual OLED, they lacked any mechanical IPD adjustment, and they didn't have any built-in microphones or headphones, instead just having a headset jack on the device itself. The controllers were also different, using visible LED lights on rings for the headset cameras to see and track them rather than IR illuminators like the Rift used. The controller mapping was also most similar to the Vive wands, but just with the option to use an analog stick as well. As you can imagine, inside-out tracking with just the two front-facing cameras wasn't the greatest. The controllers would lose tracking easily when you'd put them at your side or behind you.
You're probably wondering, okay, what if it doesn't see the hands? Well, I can put my hands down here, and after a couple seconds, what the mixed reality software does is it locks the hands in place. They don't want them flying all over the place. So with things like that, you kind of just develop habits of keeping the controllers in your FOV every once in a while, But overall, it works great. I love it. It's a really good setup.
But for the most part when playing games, you didn't notice it very much. And even at time, you might have learned habits due to its tracking style. For myself, I found I would often swing my hands at my side when in social VR, so the controllers would stay tracking as they briefly came into view. Or as well, I would subconsciously turn to look at my controllers whenever reaching for something, just to ensure that they would stay tracked. These are little things that nowadays, with our much more advanced systems, it may seem odd, but at the time it just worked, and we were just happy to be able to play these games at all. Even with inferior tracking, it was always good enough. You just got used to the limits of their tracking, and for social games, someone might comment on it, but in the end, it wasn't really that big of a deal. The biggest issue though, especially now going back and trying those old WMR, is the optics, which are pretty important in a VR device. With current gen pancake lenses, I'm much more used now to looking around the view when in VR. Whereas with WMR, it's a lot better to just keep looking straight ahead and turn your head when you want to look around. The lenses had a very small sweet spot, and would get blurry fast when you look away from the center. This was also amplified by the lack of an IPT adjustment, so unless you had the perfect fit, it was probably likely that at least one eye would be blurry a part of the time. With that all said, I still look back at WMR times fondly. I had many great experiences using it, and I know many others did as well. WMR is now discontinued, and the software isn't being supported on new versions of Windows anymore. But I do think that it did have its place at its time, and that it really did help boost the VR adoption and bring in a lot of new users because of its entry-level price. I almost wish that there was something currently at the same price for around $200 that people could buy as a bare bones headset to jump into VR on their computer. But we'll just have to wait and see. VR has advanced a lot in recent years, and while I love the things that we have now, I'll still always look back fondly at the times of WMR and what those simple headsets were able to introduce me to.